Okay, guys. So that's a warm up. We're going to be doing them every single day. Again, you sit down, you have your sketchbook out, we get to work on them. When I collect your sketchbooks at the end of the semester and at the end of the year, I'm going to be looking for these in it and be checking them off. So make sure you put a date next to it and you have it like cordoned off so I know which one it is. Like if you do a bunch of them on a page, put a little line around it or something like that. We really want to get practiced at these little bits of these things because I'm going to break them up into smaller parts so you can see how they work. Like the one we're talking about today, which is the 4 parts of a critique. It's designed to be a full essay. It's designed that each one of these is a couple paragraphs long, and they're all put together to create a total vision of a piece of artwork. And that is a huge pain. So what we're going to do instead is each morning we break down, do one of them, make sure you understand the concept of it. But in the end, it's supposed to be one large thing, and hopefully by doing it as warm-ups, we can make that a little bit easier and just sprinkle it out throughout the year. Now, so let's get to what we're talking about today. It's the 4 parts of a critique. Now, let me show you what they are here. All right. So these were designed in the 1800s. Again, describe was when we didn't have a picture of it. And it still stands, though. It's still an important part of it. Describing the artwork like the person can't see it. All of these are meant, though, to be applied to any artwork. So that's fully abstract, total photorealism, anything you got, these should be able to be applied to it. When you approach a new piece of artwork, by using these ideas, you should be able to look at it objectively, which means without emotion. Like, it's not about whether or not you like a piece of artwork, it's whether or not the piece of artwork is well made and if the artist was successful at what they tried to do. And that's what each one of these does. It kind of breaks down a different part of artwork and lets us look at it so we can see things like a Picasso as a successful artwork and a comic book as a successful piece of artwork by the same standards. It's a lot like our terms that we have to learn, like the elements and principles. It gives us a common language of art so we can all discuss it together without offending anybody and still being really clear about our meaning. So, let's look at the 4 of them here. I wrote next to, there's the name for each one of them, and next to them is what I consider the basic question of it. What is that step trying to get to? So first, you have describe. We already did that one today for our warm-up. It's what is it? What are we looking at? You would put the name of the artist, the kind of artwork it is. Is it a painting, a drawing? Is it ink? Is it paint? That all goes in here, as well as the elements of art, the really simple ones. That's line, shape, color, texture, the most basic. You're just getting that idea across of what is this thing. Number 2 is analyze. How did they do it? This is more the visual tools they're using. And we'll get more into the elements and principles as we go through things in this class, but that's what those are. The principles of design have to do with how this thing looks. Is there like a lot of repeating shapes? Then what they used was repetition. Is there the same amount of stuff on both sides of the page, and then they're using balance very strongly. So that's a lot of what's in analyze. It's how they put it together, but they mean it visually, not physically like they used a brush to apply paint to it. Next one is interpret. So what does it mean? What's the mood? What's the meaning? You know, is it supposed to be violent and angry? Is it supposed to be calm and beautiful? Like, what was the artist's idea? What are they trying to get across? That's what interpret is. Now, evaluate, this is what we think of as a critique. This is, was the artist successful? That's not, is it good, is it bad? It kind of responding to the one before it. Interpret is, what did they try to do? Evaluate is, did they do it? So, you're being asked at the end of this to come to your own opinion of whether or not the artist did what they set out to do. Now, that's not asking whether or not you think it's a good piece of artwork. You might think it looks like trash. But is that what the artist wanted? Is that what they tried to do with this piece of artwork? That's what we're trying to figure out. Here's that elaborated a little bit more. There's a poster up in the room that has a lot of this similar stuff on it. If you have any questions about these 4 steps, you can see that the 4th step on here is called judgment. A lot of the time that tends to be what it's called. I kind of jump back and forth between calling it. But your final, we'll call it evaluation. So evaluation is what we want to call that one. So number 1, it's objective and it's about facts. And look, number 2 says the same thing. Objective, about the facts. There's no, is this good, is this bad? You're just writing down what you see. But then the next 2, the second half, it stops being that. It's subjective. It's about your personal opinion. So it requires thought. Same with number 4 there, subjective, requires thought. That's an important distinction between the 2 halves of this. So 1 and 2, you just have to see it and say what you see. Number 3 and 4, you have to do a little critical thinking and decide some stuff. Number 1, what specific elements of art, and you can see those above the board: color, line, shape, texture, form, space, and value. Can you find that? What's the title? Who's the artist? When and where was it created? What's the media? And what's the primary subject of the piece? Then analysis. That's the principles of art, which are balance, emphasis, movement, pattern, repetition, proportion, etc. How can you find these within the piece? We'll get to those principles of art. I don't expect you to know them yet, but it's a good one to know about. And it wants to know like how the picture's organized and what the elements of it are, that sort of thing. Interpretation, that's what's the artist trying to get across? What feelings does it bring up in you? Express your opinion is an important part of this one. So it kind of means interpretation can't really be wrong. We'll discuss interpret when we, like after the warm-up, we'll kind of talk about it a little bit, see what people came up with. A lot of people are going to have different interpretations of it. And that's great. That means you're thinking about the artwork and bringing your own opinion to it. So people can have different answers for interpretation. And then finally, judgment. Did you like it? Why or why not? Is the piece effective? Like, did the artist do what they set out to do in the interpretation? That's what judgment's about. So, here's another one of our describe slides, another one of our warm-ups. And I'm asking a specific question about this one, because describe, we could literally spend paragraphs and paragraphs on it. Sometimes I'll ask you these specific questions about it, but they're always trying to get to the point of that step of a critique. So this is, what is the illustration of, and what is it made out of? A lot of the times, people say sad eyes. The material it's made out of is watercolor. That's what gives it that drippy quality. But what other parts of the description are missing from that? Colors, materials, what parts of the face aren't there? That sort of information. Just saying that it's sad eyes in watercolor is not going to get the whole idea across. That next step, analyze. What principle of design is making this sculpture interesting? Again, we haven't really talked about principles yet, but it would be things like emphasis, because there's just that one spot of white. But also, size is one of those principles of design. And the fact that this is so tiny that it's on the end of a pin is part of what makes it an interesting piece, is something that pulls you in and makes you think about it. So that would fit under analyze. Interpret. This is a poster for an anime movie called Perfect Blue. And there's a lot of stuff going on in it. So for that, to help lead people through that, I put these 3 questions on there, just so we know this is what interpret's about. What is the artist trying to express? What is the mood? And what is the meaning? And this one you got to kind of pull apart, because there's little details in here you might miss. Like, look down at her hand. Where the mirror's broken, in one part of it, she's holding a microphone. And another part of it, she's holding a bloody ice pick. This movie's actually about a woman going through, like, severe mental trauma, and she's kind of losing her mind. She is not sure if the things she's seeing are real or not. So the breaking of the glass and us seeing, like, different versions of her face, different versions of her hand, is representative of her feeling that. So it's supposed to feel crazy. It's supposed to feel uneasy, and they're supposed to feel like a break in reality. What's the mood of this? Mood comes a lot from color. You got a lot of like deep blues and purples and a black background. How does that make you feel? Like, and that's just guttural. That's just at that second. How do you feel when you see this art? And then finally, what's the meaning? Like, and if I hadn't told you the meaning, what would you think this was? Because that's generally how these kind of warm-ups are going to go. Is I'm going to say what's the meaning, and I want you guys to come up with your own idea. After the fact, I'll probably tell you what it really is supposed to be. And that's a good way. That's a really good way to know if the artist was successful. If you look at the artwork and get the same mood and meaning out of it that they wanted you to, then they were pretty successful. Then finally, evaluate. And this one, doing as a single step can be kind of hard because you didn't do all that build up. You should probably still run through those steps in your mind. But here's the idea. So you got this spray paint. The thing on the left, somebody spray painted a mathematical equation up on the wall. If you plug that mathematical equation into a calculator, you get the graph that's over on the right, which is the anarchy symbol. There's something ironic about that, like the fact that math is a lot of rules and a lot of structure, and you're using it to create a graph, which is another kind of structure. But anarchy is the lack of rules. It's a total lack of structure. It's when there's no government, no police, anarchy, punks scream it a lot. That's probably the irony the artist was going for. The weird idea of that, this like mathematical equation to create something that means no rules. So we're asking ourselves, was the artist successful at what they tried to do here? If you were walking down the street and saw this piece of graffiti, do you think the artist successfully got that idea across? Is it well made? Did they do a good job of it? Could that stencil be better? And is it a good composition? Is there something more artistic to it? Yes, there's a ton of meaning to it, but as a visual art piece, does it work? Is it interesting to look at? Or if, unless you know the meaning of it, is it just some numbers on a wall? That's the kind of question you got to ask and evaluate. All right. With the last bit of class, I want you to try and do one more of these. It's a two-parter. Describe it. Tell me what you see, what it's made out of, what colors they used, what the material they used is. And then I want you to analyze it. Now, I know you guys don't know the elements and principles, but you can tell me what they did and why they did it. Like, you know, there's color choices and shadows and shapes and stuff like that. Can you describe artistically how this thing is set up? That's all I want you to do. So for the rest of class, you can work on that first description, and then you can work on this description and analysis. And we'll come back tomorrow, and we'll start working on art again. All right, guys. Have a good day.